I borrowed the thin book from the missing girl's apartment and took it back with me to the transporter room. The technician beamed me back to the Wapsi, and we got down to the serious business of primping. At least, it was serious to Titania, and I had come to recognize it was an intrinsic part of being a beautiful woman. I still wasn't sold on that, but I had agreed to try, and Titania's standards were uncompromising. "Okay," she said. "I can handle the bodice, of course, and if you let me keep the skirt fairly narrowed down to about your knees, I think I can manage the lower part, too." "Where will you get the volume of material?" I asked. "Your hair won't be quite as thick tonight, but I doubt anyone will notice." I changed the main view screen into a mirror and watched my partner work her magic. Magic it was. The gown was even tighter, at least in appearance, than the one in the borrowed book. If I had been wearing real fabric, I'd have been afraid to take a deep breath and forget any thoughts of, bending over. Of course, with the corset effect that Titania liked so much, neither action was really an option anyway. It was a good thing I didn't need to use my lungs to get oxygen. The skirt was indeed narrow to the knees. I could only take such short steps that I felt like I was back on Machovia. "Oh, lighten up," Titania chided me, listening in on my thoughts as usual. "But it is too tight," I insisted. "I need to be able to walk in the silly thing. And dance, too, I'll bet," Titania said. "Oh, do you think so?" I asked, then wondered why I was asking her about human customs. Of course, she had learned some things through her interfaces with TRYX's symbiont. Titania confirmed my guess. "Well, I can assure you that if TRYX were getting ready for a formal reception, she'd expect to be dancing before the night was through." My symbiont had been completing the changes to what was actually her form, however much mine was constrained by being inside of it. The long white gloves, however did other women keep them clean, were mostly just a pigment change for her. No need even to simulate nails. I thought we were done, but Titania wasn't ready. "You need some more accessories," she said. "Oh, bother," I grumped. "What makes you think so?" "Well, the picture has some, and TRYX thinks they're very important." I sighed and tried to decide what to use. Titania had made earrings to hold spare metals, so I had those. About the only other accessory that I had was my communicator badge. Well, that would do. I fastened it to the shoulder of my gown, forgetting for a second that it was designed to cling to standard uniform fabric. Titania faked that too. But when I looked in the mirror, even I could see it didn't fit there. "Stupid fashion rules," I muttered, looking for another place to put it. In a silent suggestion, Titania made a high collar around my neck, and it was obvious that putting the comm badge at my throat would work. "Thanks, T," I said with real gratitude. "I have to admit, I'm glad you got a briefing from TRYX, however unintentional." I sensed agreement from my symbiont and looked around once more for anything else I should add. "Just a purse," Titania said. "A what?" "A small bag, to be carried in your hand. The woman in the picture has one. It's called a purse." "Why would I want to carry a bag around?" I asked. It was only for a few hours, after all, and I could just beam back to the runabout if I needed anything. "For feminine essentials," Titania answered. "A bit of makeup, some facial tissues, and, feminine essentials." TRYX always carried one when she went out to socialize. "Titania, you're even crazier than usual," I snorted. "You are my makeup, and I couldn't sniffle or cry unless you made it happen. Not that I intend to anyway. And as for the feminine things, I caught that connotation in your thoughts, and I do not and will not need that sort of help." "Yes, dear," she said patiently. "But they don't know about me. In this technology, that's what women did. You need to fit in." I sighed and studied the picture of the entertainment star. At least it wasn't a very big bag. A few minutes programming the replicator with the unusual request, and I had a purse complete with feminine essentials. How wonderful for me. We were still ready well before the appointed time, so I tried to get a computer download on social activities on Teton. Unfortunately, the backwards planet didn't have that capability. They really were pretty strict about not using current technology unless they absolutely had to. So I called up a file on 20th Century Earth Society, hoping it would apply well enough to help. Long before I worked my way through all the information, the comm channel chirped. "Teton Central Control to Federation Vessel Waspy, Wapinsi, The man's voice ran down in confusion. Wopsy will do, I offered. Go ahead. Commissar Ston has arrived at the reception hall and invites you to beam down at your convenience, he announced gratefully. Thank you, I said, standing up. I'm ready whenever you are. When the shimmer cleared, I saw that I had been beamed directly to the reception hall. Standing in front of me was another very tall man, though he was painfully thin, and Inspector Darius. I thought I might weigh as much as the man I hadn't met, though I figured Darius would make about 3 of me. It made the man I assumed was the commissar look positively emaciated. Darius spoke first, confirming my supposition. Commissar Ston, may I present Federation Field Agent Lieutenant Commander Zora. I winced at the long, cumbersome title as Darius completed the mirror introduction of Ston to me, as though I hadn't heard what he said to Ston. Is something wrong? Ston asked immediately. It's just that long title is so. I said. Formal. Ston offered. Yes, I agreed. I'd much prefer just to be Zora tonight. Very well, that is how it shall be, Ston pronounced. I must say, your description doesn't do you justice. A simple word like green doesn't begin to explain your emerald eyes. Listen to him, Titania chortled. This one is a smooth talker. Too smooth, if you ask me, I thought. Ston followed his pretty compliment with an apology. If you'll forgive me, Zora, as tonight's host, I have to wait for a few more guests to arrive. The Planetary Council has granted us the privilege of transporting a few special guests, since we were going to transport you anyway. Inspector Darius has consented to be your escort until I can get free myself. I nodded and looked over at the quiet giant I had met that afternoon. He was frowning. Again. And somehow I knew it was because of something that I had done. Then Darius stuck his elbow out at me, and I almost reacted defensively before I remembered seeing that in one of the files I had quickly scanned. He was offering me a handhold in case I needed a little help with my stability. Well, screw him and the horse he rode in on. That's a good one, Titania laughed in my ear. And I thought you didn't like him. Before I could respond, she continued, but you still need to fit in. Take his arm, dear. He thinks he's being polite. I reached out and lightly touched my fingers to the inside of his arm, which might as well have been the granite suggested by the sharp planes of his face, and he moved slowly out toward the main part of the room. When we were out of the commissar's hearing, I said, "You're frowning again." That made his glower deepen, but he didn't say anything. I can't fix it if you won't tell me what's wrong, I observed, quietly, but with a building edge as well. Do you always have to wave your Federation technology in our faces? He asked abruptly. What technology? I asked in turn, confused. That communicator badge could hardly be more prominently displayed, he said. Oh, I said. He was right, for once. I needed an excuse, so I said, Federation regulations require it any time I'm away from my vessel on a solo mission. I didn't know if that was even true, actually, but he nodded, showing he was all too familiar with the demands of duty. Couldn't you have put it in your purse or something? He suggested, still not happy. This little thing? I said, waving the useless bag. There's hardly room for the things that can't go anywhere else. And this gown doesn't have any pockets. You can say that again, he observed, but there was a grudging note of respect in his voice. Titania interjected her inner comment. There, he's doing it, too. Are humans that hard of hearing? Shoo, I hissed. Silently. My escort stayed silent, too. Great conversationalist. Eventually, we wandered by some refreshments, and he found something else to say. May I get you something to eat or drink? He asked. No, thank you. I'm fine, I replied. That about covered that topic, and we wandered silently some more. A small orchestra started playing, and the guests sort of drifted away from the center of what was clearly a dance floor. Darius sighed as the group started playing something with a clear enough pattern to support dancing. What's the matter now? I asked. Oh, nothing, he started, then interrupted himself when he saw what I knew was a frown on my face. He smiled without humor and said, I'm sorry. I think I owe you at least honesty. It's just that I truly love to dance, and I didn't think you'd want to. You're a dancer? Now that was a surprise. The big, taciturn man would seem as out of place on a dance floor as a hippopotamus. At times, he said, with a sneaky little grin showing more in his eyes than on his lips. Go for it, Titania demanded. Well, I'm not sure I know your dance steps, but if you'll tell me what to do, I'm game to try, I said softly. Actually, that was true. Anything would be better than this silence. For the first time, I saw a real smile on his face as Darius led me to the cleared space. All of a sudden, the big, stone-headed giant was like a real human being. Just follow my lead, he instructed. That was a lot of help. Not. Then actually, it turned out to be quite sufficient. Though by no means light on his feet, he moved with controlled precision, guiding me with gentle pressures, and I soon caught the rhythm of the music. In moments, we were swirling around the floor like polished experts. Of course, the expertise was all on his part. When it came time to turn, he turned, and I just kept up. It was fun. I was surprised, but it was. There was an inherent artistry to the music, coupled with grace in our motions, that I had never experienced in my old life. Even the silly gown added to the feeling, the silken material accenting our motion with flips and swirls of its own. It was even nice to be dancing the feminine part. I could just relax and let him decide what to do, focusing on my own grace instead of on avoiding the other dancers. Now I know why TRYX likes dancing so much, Titania whispered to me. I nodded mentally as I concentrated on responding to Darius. He had been looking anywhere but at me, and I put it down to some aspect of guiding our dance, but after we had settled in a bit, I felt him look down. I looked up a long way up to see his eyes studying me from an, interestingly close range. His own eyes were a rich, dark brown that seemed infinitely deep. Wise eyes somehow, or at least with experiences I didn't feel I had. I pulled back a bit, trying to keep my perspective. After all, this was just a colonial inspector, and not a very friendly one at that. He noticed my unease and said, I suppose I deserve that. It would have been insincere to deny my attitude, so I said nothing. I owe you an apology, Darius continued. I did indeed have a chip on my shoulder, as the old saying goes, and I took out my irritation on you. You've done nothing to deserve it. That's all right, I said, realizing as I said it that I meant it. I truly do understand the irritation you must feel at having some outsider with a big reputation intrude into your business. A well-deserved reputation, it would seem, Darius said. Before I could ask what he meant, he continued, the bit of mud you found did indeed contain traces of sulfur and of methane and other hydrocarbons. Before I could find out if he thought that was significant, the music ended, and we joined in the polite applause for the orchestra. Most of it died out quickly, but one pair of hands continued and approached. It was the commissar, apparently through with his obligations to greet arriving guests. You dance very well, he said as he approached. Thank you, commissar, but I think it was all Darius. He's a very good teacher. Yes, well, he's good at many things, Stan said dismissively. Perhaps you will grant me the honor of the next dance. I nodded, and Darius stepped back. The orchestra started up again as though they had been waiting for the movement, and I found myself being guided by the skeletal thin man through a more sedate dance than I had shared with Darius. What were you and Darius talking about as I walked up? He asked. Oh, just a bit of mud we found at the apartment of one of the missing girls. I'm not sure if it has any significance. Mud? Stan asked. Yes, I confirmed. I noticed it had traces of various chemicals. Perhaps it will help find the abductors. Just in this afternoon and already you solve our case, he said with a smile. It was funny, but where Darius's smile was mostly in his eyes, Stan's smile didn't seem to touch his eyes at all, just his thin lips. Hardly, I disagreed. The compounds were all reasonably common, sulfur, a bit of methane, some other things. All naturally occurring, I expect, so there's still a whole planet to search. Indeed, he said. I noticed him catch the eye of a servant near the edge of the hall, and then he turned back to me. So, tell me about winning that race on Macho Via against the famous Palomino, he said. Oh, that, I said with a grimace. Well, it wasn't my idea even to be in the race. She was actually faster than me, but I was able to sustain my pace for just a bit longer and pass her at the end. So, you have great endurance, he observed. Perhaps. Certainly, it is more my strength than flat-out speed or brute force. Very interesting, Stan mused, a glint of real interest in his dark eyes. The music ended, and we stepped apart. That was not nearly as much fun as dancing with Darius, Titania said. You can say that again, I replied. Then before she could comment, I continued, forget it. I'll explain later. Stan was poking his own elbow out at me, and I took his arm. Something about the change in our relative positions, perhaps the fact that I was beside him, brought just a whiff of a strangely familiar smell. Stan was wearing some musky cologne, which must have been masking it when we were face to face. He led me toward a doorway on the fringe of the ballroom while I was trying to place the smell. Titania got it first, not surprisingly. That's the smell from the mud. Almost the same proportions, too. I looked around frantically for Darius, wanting to let him know of our discovery. He was there, near another side of the room. When I saw him looking our way, I tried to roll my eyes toward Stan, with a pleading look on my face. He saw it. I know he saw it. For a second, his eyes narrowed, then he got a smug expression that I'd have loved to slap off his face. Stupid rockhead. I screamed internally. Arrogant, self-important idiot thinks I'm asking him to dance again. Or maybe he just thinks his charm has overwhelmed me. Well, he was quite nice to dance with, Titania observed. Oh, shut up. He's an idiot. Here we are with a really major clue, and he's too full of himself to give me a chance to explain. I'm sure he'll understand when we tell him. And after all, it's not like a man as important as the commissar can just disappear. Whenever we tell Darius will be soon enough, promised Titania. Of all the mistakes she'd made, that one was probably the worst. Stan interrupted my thoughts with a comment as we reached the doorway. Perhaps you would like some fresh air. Sure, whatever, I said, still distracted with my thoughts on the stubborn, blind investigator. He led me out onto a quiet balcony overlooking a dark garden. Teton had several moons, all of which had a bluish tint as they reflected the planet's primary. 2 were above the horizon, giving enough light to see people moving along the shadowed paths. Grateful for the excuse, I stepped away from the suspect commissar and looked up at the sky. I am so happy that you've come to our planet, Stan said. I just nodded. Right then, I wasn't happy I'd come. And I must say, the reputation of you Federation field agents is no more than the truth. Who would have expected that you'd solve our most baffling case in a single afternoon? I shook my head, turning to look back at him. I told you, I didn't really solve anything. I just found a bit of mud. But that's the thing, don't you see? When they analyze that mud, they're going to find that it comes from a certain swamp where I am prospecting for petroleum. As he said that, he pulled out a Romulan disruptor. Before I could move, it buzzed as a beam shot out at me. I can damp this, Titania promised, even as the ray enveloped me. Good, I said, collapsing to the floor. But you should be okay, Titania said frantically. I am, I assured her. But we don't want them to know that. What would the effect have been? Simple stun, about 4 hours on a normal human, she reported. I lay as still as I could while I listened to Stan's steps as they approached. The first thing I felt was his hand pulling my comm badge off my collar. Then I felt several hands lifting me over the balcony to yet more hands waiting below. With Titania's help, I was able to remain limp as they carried me through the garden. It's surprisingly difficult not to react to sounds or unwanted contact. They loaded me into a rumbling vehicle, and we were soon being thrown about in another journey without the benefit of inertial dampers. Then we transferred to yet another vehicle, one that had a different motion. Since most Federation vessels seem to be sitting still when everything is working correctly, it took me a while to realize that this second craft must be flying on wings. I hope the thing wasn't as ancient as the technology it used. It's hard to tell how much time has passed when you have no references. Doubly hard once Titania became part of my life, since she takes care of some of the natural internal clocks. I don't believe it, Titania interrupted my musing. You complain if I gave you water in a desert. Oh, sorry T, I said. I was just trying to decide how long to fake being unconscious. I assure you, I can still gauge the reactions your body would have without my presence, and I will alert you accordingly, she promised, still unhappy with me. Well, this time she had good reason. I was being ungrateful. And I hope you picked up on that apology too, I thought to her. She was silent, but a bit of her attitude always showed, and I knew she'd get over it. Well, before the time I needed to fake revival, the vehicle landed, and I was hauled out to be unceremoniously thrown over someone's shoulder. His hand on my back was unnecessarily familiar, but I couldn't do anything about it. Yet, I was getting to the point where I was going to do something, though. Something massive. Calm down, Titania ordered. Even though I can protect you from many dangers, we are not invulnerable. Neither are these goons, I said. Then I nearly did go berserk. The one thing that had really made me angry when I was still the sedentary analyst of my past existence was when someone would assault a helpless person, especially a woman. As we moved along, I could hear the most anguished, heart-rending screams from a voice that still had some memory of feminine tones within the coarse roughness. Some woman, was suffering tortures that could not be allowed to continue. Titania sensed my mental decision to do something, anything to help whoever was screaming in such terrible agony. Please, Zora, be patient just a little longer. It won't help her if we get stopped before we're even started. I don't think I can, T. I just can't lay here doing nothing. You must. If I have to, I'll insist, she threatened, but the tone in her voice showed just as much distress as I felt. How long until we can wake up? I asked, looking for something that might at least be a start. I suppose it could be just about any time now, she admitted. There is sufficient variability in effect that it would not be unreasonable. Good, I said, then started to lift my head. Not so quick, girlie, the man carrying me said when he felt the motion. That alerted others, and though I did open my eyes and look around, there was enough attention focused on me to prevent any effective action. You were right, I told my symbiont. She gave me a mental nod, but before she could say anything, we reached the scene of the screaming. The man stood me on my heels, allowing me just a moment to stabilize, then let go. I turned quickly to the sound and saw a woman being assaulted, right out in the middle of a small clearing. She was staked to the ground, and from the looks of the group around her, the man assaulting her now was not the first, nor would he be the last. You filthy scoundrels! I yelled, moving toward the woman. Before I took more than a step, two men grabbed my arms. I was virtually lifted off my feet, stymied while Ston moved in front of me.